On today's World Insight, beyond the brain's boundaries, we speak to Dr. Miguel Nicolelis, a pioneering figure in brain-computer interfaces technology, to delve into the evolving relationship between humans and AI.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian. In recent years, artificial intelligence is becoming an important research tool to speed up the popular brain-computer interfaces, or BCI technology. For example, recently Neuralink has put a brain chip into the third patient. Meanwhile, cities in China unveil plans to boost the BCI industry. To dive deeper into the cutting edge of BCI, I had an in-depth conversation with Miguel Nicolelis, a pioneering figure in the field and the author of the latest book, The True Creator of Everything. Joining us, Miguel Nicolelis, who is the Professor Emeritus from Duke University and the author of the book, The True Creator of Everything. Professor, what a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for your invitation. It's a great honor and pleasure for me.
How excited are you of the latest development in this technology?
Well, in reality, we created this technology about 25 years ago, and we named it a brain-machine interface. And from that early development, a series of spin-offs have came out over the years. And one of them is what people call brain-computing interface. And today, this technology is spreading all over the world, here in Brazil, in the United States, in Europe, in Asia, particularly in China and Japan. So there are many developments happening every day. Every day we have a new announcement now. So it's a very fast-growing field, which I call a new industry. It's an industry of the brain, or neurotech industry, which is picking up speed very, very quickly all over the world. So as one of the guys who started the whole business almost a quarter of a century ago, I'm very excited about the current state of the art of the field.
Now, there are a lot of debates in this, and you have been very straight talker, if I could use that word, by suggesting don't exaggerate everything. Try to focus on the real stuff. So what is the real stuff of BCI now? How much it can help human beings? To what extent?
Yeah, this is a very good point. I think we need to be very clear and very straightforward with society about what can be done and what is just hype or fantasy. At this point, we know that brain-computing interface and brain-machine interfaces can be helpful to patients suffering from a variety of brain disorders, a variety of neurological disorders, and very likely even psychiatric disorders. So that's the concrete mainstream ideas that I'm very excited about, because I have been witnessing the development of these new therapies with partners here in Brazil, in Europe, and in Beijing at Xuanhu Hospital, the Capital Medical University, where we have a very wonderful partnership. We have seen patients walking again, recovering the ability to walk after many, many years of spinal cord injuries. So I'm excited about the concrete, objective applications in medicine right now.
So you are actually suggesting Elon Musk's earlier talk about Neuralink might not necessarily be the reality in the future. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, unfortunately, in any new area, in any very important, bright, and futuristic field, you always have opportunistic people. You always have people that come to spread hype, to try to spread ideas that will never materialize. Because, of course, the gains are very big. The financial gains are enormous. Mr. Musk has no idea about neuroscience, or he doesn't know anything about this technology. He just acquired a company that, by the way, was founded by 3 of my students, former students. So I know very well what they did there. And I don't believe that the field is going to grow particularly in the direction that this company is going. I think that the field is going to scale up with what we call non-invasive BCIs, brain-computing interfaces that do not require neurosurgical procedures or chronic implants in the brain, even though I invented them. In 1999, I published the first one of these invasive implants, and I know exactly what they are good for. But they are good for a minority of patients. And the vast majority of patients may benefit from non-invasive devices that are more affordable, much safer, and can scale up to hundreds of millions of patients around the world. So this is reality. That's not a fantasy that, this guy is trying to sell around the world. Well, the competition with science fiction is very difficult because science fiction can say anything, right? And I wrote a book on science fiction that is going to come out in China in a few months. I love science fiction, but what we scientists need to do more is to talk directly to the people, to society, through shows like yours, or to interviews, or to actual documentaries where we can explain what is real and what is feasible objectively, and what the wonders of the human brain, because I have been working in neuroscience for 40 years, and every day there is something new that I read, that someone discovered, that I'm absolutely stunned by the beauty, by the wonders of the human mind.
Right.
And that's the message that I think neuroscientists need to keep talking about, because I'm very optimistic. I think we can debunk these guys that talk just about fantasy. It's just a question of communicating. And we can do that too.
It's not just about BCI, it's also about artificial intelligence, and many other new technologies these days are on the horizon. We see people talk about AI as if the human being will be evaporated from the earth, as if it is going to take the place of the human's brains. Of course, we understand the fear of technologies every time when they pop up. But there's, of course, a lot of issues about investment, hedging, and, all of this. So to a scientist like you, sir, who have been working on BCI for at least 3 decades, tell us more what you have learned about how to deal with these ups and downs of emotions, sentiments, science fictions. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you raised this issue, because the episode I just mentioned to you was about artificial intelligence. I was invited to basically say what is reality about it and what is, again, just hype. And what people liked about this discussion that I had was that I was very direct to the point that artificial intelligence is neither intelligent nor artificial. Intelligence is a property of organisms, of life. You cannot mimic it in a digital computer, because our brains and the brains of animals are not digital machines. They work in a complete different way, with a complete different logic. And it's neither artificial, because for these programs to work, you need a huge amount of people working to make it work. So I can tell you with a very straight face, to your colleagues and to your audience, artificial intelligence will never replace human beings. It's an impossible thing. It cannot happen. We cannot be mimicked in the full projection of our skills and mental and cognitive attitudes by a machine. So that fear can be easily removed if scientists start speaking about reality to the public. The public needs to listen to people who do not have financial interests in this field and who have been working for decades, as you mentioned. So that's the first step. The second step is, again, to show that you can, of course, take advantage of artificial intelligence and other technologies to improve the quality of life of human beings. But the key principle here is that we create technology. We humans produce new ideas and new machines. It's not the opposite. We are the masters of technology, not the opposite. And that's what needs to be known by a vast majority of society that is not informed about that.
Having clarified all of these important points, let's go directly into the technologies of BCI. How would you describe, Professor Nicolelis, the different stages of development of this technology over the past more than 2 decades. What are some of the most important periods, and how would you compare what we are having now with the significance of the earlier development?
Yeah, the early work was all done in animals in laboratories. You know, when we published our first paper in 1999, John Chapin and I described how rats could use their brain activity to move a robotic arm in one dimension. A year later, we already had monkeys doing much more complex tasks. Without moving their bodies, our little monkeys could imagine creating three-dimensional movements of a robotic arm, and the robotic arm would move under the control of the thinking process of these monkeys. So what we discovered in 2 or 3 years of work in the beginning was that some motor behaviors could be reproduced out of the electrical brain activity into mechanical work, that a robotic device or a computer or even a virtual avatar. 4 years later, we had a monkey controlling 2 avatar arms in a computer game. So the monkey was playing with 2 new arms. And the beauty of it is that he didn't lose the ability to use his own arm. He now had 4 arms. And he could play with all 4 simultaneously because the brain of that animal had incorporated the virtual arms as if they were part of the animal's own body representation. So this went very quickly, very fast. In 2004, we published the first human study. We showed that humans could reproduce the same kind of behavior that we saw in monkeys, even in patients doing an intraoperative procedure for Parkinson's disease. The patient is conscious. The patient, at a certain moment in the surgery, has to be awake to help the neurosurgeon performing some tasks. And we had 11 patients using our brain-machine interface to play a video game in the operating room. And they did. No difficulty, and it took 2 minutes to train them. It was very quick. So at that point, we realized that we could basically get humans to control very sophisticated robotic devices directly with their minds. So in 2014, just 10 years later, we had the opening kickoff of the Football World Cup here in Brazil, because we are all fanatic football fans here. So I took to the president of Brazil the idea of opening the World Cup here in São Paulo using the most modern brain-computer interface at the time for a paraplegic patient to wearing a robotic vest that you can see on my wall here on the right, to give the opening kickoff of the World Cup. And he did. He had been paraplegic for a decade.
I see.
He had not walked for 10 years, but there he was in the football field, 65,000 people around him in the stadium, about 1.2 billion people watching, and he delivered the opening kickoff of the World Cup.
Wow.
So when that happened, 2 years later, when we published the results showing that the patients were recovering movements, in fact, you can look at the graphs and you're going to see that the startups start appearing all over the world. 2017 is the first year of startups, going everywhere, because it became clear that it could be done.
We understand there are some new development also in China. You earlier mentioned about your cooperation with Chinese scientists. I also been doing some research and found out that just recently, a Chinese startup, I wouldn't mention the name, just not for commercial exposure, but here talking about news that tests of the startups that can actually do 2 different things. First, it was its ability to decode thoughts to speech in real time, and also remotely controlling a robot arm using thoughts alone. So is that a real breakthrough? Do you see also other similar things popping up in different parts of the world?
Well, I have not seen
Yeah.
this particular example, so I cannot vouch or say anything
Yeah.
about this company. I don't even know what it is.
That's a great
But this
attitude,
kind of
by the way.
yeah, I never criticize or say anything about something I never saw. So, but what I can tell you is this: our first experiment with monkeys was to control a robotic arm using the thinking pattern of the monkeys, and this has been done in humans many times since 2000 when we did publish our first paper on monkeys. The same thing with speech decoding. There are lots of groups. There is a wonderful group at Tsinghua University doing that for many years. There are several Chinese groups that I have heard about and seen papers published about. So the question is not that these are new applications. What is happening is the technology is being perfected. The technology is getting better. The speed of the system is getting better. Patients are getting more used to the system. So in that sense, these are incremental applications that are needed for you to bring this to a very large number of people around the world.
Right.
But there are many different things. We are here in our laboratories testing a concept that I first published in 2018 of communicating or collaboration of multiple brains, multiple human beings collaborating mentally to achieve a common goal, a common task.
Wow,
I call
amazing.
this the brain net. Is a network of brains is the name that I gave to it, and it worked. So we are going to see very interesting things where, for instance, physicians can collaborate with patients in real time. A patient that has a severe neurological issue, a physical therapist or a physician or a nurse may be able to help them during their rehabilitation process.
Sounds fascinating. So the reason why we need to have this new technology is going to help many people who will not be able to have the ability to move physically by just using their thoughts and their mind. So on that point, what kinds of disease now can be, or what kinds of patients now suffer from different kinds of disease can be supported now with the real technologies, not potential technologies?
Well, you need to know that a year ago, a very important paper came out, was published in the Lancet Neurology, a very famous journal, scientific journal, showing that latest estimates around the world suggest that 3.4 billion people suffer from at least one of the 37 most frequent neurological disorders. That is 43% of humanity. Is a huge number. This number just before the pandemic was 1 billion. Is now 3.4 billion. And only talking about 37 most prevalent neurological disorders. It doesn't include psychiatric disorders, okay? You could add 1 billion more if you put only psychiatric disorders on top of that number. So when you talk about the state-of-the-art of brain-machine interfaces and brain-computing interfaces, you are talking about being able to help a huge number of these people, like patients with spinal cord injury, for instance.
Yeah.
Patients that are recovering from a stroke, that lost the ability to speak or to move. Patients with degenerative disorders like Parkinson's disease. I believe, and this is now on the front line of the field, I believe that the same technology could help people with chronic epilepsy that cannot be treated otherwise with medication or surgery. The same thing, I actually believe, based on some preliminary studies, that we may be able to help patients with chronic depression, for instance, which could be 500 million people around the world. Okay? So in that sense, that's the reason I tell you that my focus is centered on medicine, because the global impact could be tremendous.
What do you think can be some of the most important technological development directions that would help what you had just said, affordable and certainly accessible and at the same time accurate, I guess, for the general public?
Yeah, well, one of the things that this study in the Lancet revealed too, that was very concerning, very important, is that despite this huge number of people, 3.4 billion, 43% of humanity, very few countries around the world have public policies specifically directed to brain disorders. It's a very minority of countries that have that kind of policy created. So here in Brazil, I have been talking about that for a couple of years now, trying to create a national movement, a national policy, public policy, to allow patients that otherwise could not afford a private treatment to be treated in a large scale. So that is, I think, the first major step is to, as you mentioned in the beginning of our conversation, to make society aware of the size of this problem and how countries like Brazil and China, India, can actually handle them with public policies that focus on the human brain. And the second aspect is to actually be innovative in the ways we assess these people. Because like in China, Brazil has a huge population in the countryside. And not everywhere in Brazil, in the countryside, you can have a brain hospital, like the Xuanhu Hospital in Beijing, which is one of the best in the world. You cannot have that all over Brazil because Brazil is a huge country.
Right.
It has more than 5,500 towns. So you need to be creative to be able to have remote treatment to these patients. The patients can be followed at a distance. So there are potential creative and innovative ways to basically create a network that could cover this huge number of people that will need care, healthcare in the near future. You know, because the metaphor that I have been using in Brazil is like we are about to see a tsunami of patients, huge numbers, and our hospitals cannot handle. Simply, we cannot do it. You know. So we need to create a new structure of public health care to provide for these patients.
Right. What you just said, Professor Nicolelis, is not just a brain-computer interface, it's also technology-public policy interface. Well, that is another layer of challenges we're seeing today. Having said that, though, I want to go into details about some ethic issues and principle issues related to any new technology, and certainly BCI is one of those. We have seen new technologies, for example, using brain signals to communicate with external device, but can you tell us how is it likely to be done in a way that is not going to infringe personal privacy and is not going to be taken advantage of by those who might have a evil goals when these technology applied? Professor.
I had a great professor here in medical school 40 years ago. Perhaps the best physician in Brazil was my teacher, okay? And he used to tell me that any piece of technology that is invented, including a pen, okay? I like fountain pens, right? I write with fountain pens. In fact, when I go to China, my favorite place in Beijing is a street where all sorts of paper is sold. So I like to pay whatever money is needed to buy different types of paper to write with my pens. Well,
very interesting.
Pens can be used to write, of course.
Yeah.
And they are fundamental technologies, but they can harm you. If you get this beautiful fountain pen and you use as a weapon, you can harm someone. And that's what my teacher used to tell me. Any technology has a good and a bad potential application, and we need to be aware of that. And I'm, of course, all for provisions that protect patients and users of BCI, of their privacy, of their rights.
Yeah.
Although I also think that there's a lot of misinformation about that. We are not reading people's mind. What I'm actually able to do with brain computing or brain machine interface is to read some motor behaviors that your brain is producing, some signals that coordinate your voice or your hands or your legs.
Right.
But I cannot go much more deeper than that. Okay?
Yeah. My final question, I mean, you have been traveling around the world also, especially to the global south, including countries like China. You've been working with your publishers on your latest book, of course, The True Creator of Everything, and earlier on Beyond the Boundaries with Zhan Lu, for example, and also interact with your counterparts in China and in many other countries. What do you think this kind of interaction between you, the publisher, the public, and you and the co-workers and your counterparts all over the world could enrich you in the future development of technologies and also in understanding what collectively can be done?
Well, believe it or not, I truly believe that science, or the way we do science around the world, even with all the geopolitical problems of today, could be a great model and a great example for the whole planet. Because scientists still collaborate beyond borders, between national states, between beliefs, between political ideologies. We still want to achieve the betterment of the mankind, the humankind. We work every day, I think, with this dream, with this utopia, that science can improve the quality of life of millions of people around the world. And scientists around the global south, for instance, is almost like a new model of collaboration. And I'm very proud of the fact that Brazil and China have these extensive collaborations now, scientific collaborations, cultural collaborations,
Yes.
because it shows that it can be done. You don't need to be competitors. You can be colleagues. You can be cooperators. You can collaborate for the improvement of the condition, of the human condition, which is the central objective of science. So in that sense, humbly, I suggest that the scientific method and the way the scientific community works around the world could be a great model for everything around the globe, you know?
Got it. Miguel Nicolelis, the professor emeritus from Duke University and author of the latest book, The True Creator of Everything, and it's also having its Chinese version. Congratulations. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
That's my latest conversation with Miguel Nicolelis on the latest development of BCI. He is author of the book, The Creator of Everything. And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search for World Insight. Check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on X and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for being with us. Bye for now.